are joined now by Bill Bender. He is a senior writer for Sporting News. Bill, how are we doing this morning?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive right into this thing because obviously we're coming off a huge week of college football, a ton of really big matchups, and I've sort of been trying to ask myself throughout the week as I've digested the results, which game I think I learned the most from. Do you have a game where you go, I feel like I learned the most about either team because of that game?
I think Ole Miss, honestly, which is a weird pick because I know
like
there were two larger games because Ole Miss might be ready to finally go to the playoff. That was a big win for them, and I kind of learned that LSU is just, as much as I love their defense, the offense isn't quite there. And I think Caden Durham's injury had something to do with that. They couldn't run the ball, but Ole Miss and Trinidad Chambliss, I mean, you know, I think last time I talked to you guys, we weren't talking about a Ferris State transfer coming off 3 straight 300-yard games, right?
We were not. No, we certainly were not, Bill. I'm glad you brought up that game, though, because we were talking earlier about sort of the AP poll and the effect that it has on our perception of some of these teams, right? And LSU is a super interesting case because not only did they start highly ranked, but so did two of their marquee wins that have so far have not aged well at all in Clemson and Florida. As you look at LSU, you see the loss to Ole Miss, you see the wins that they had kind of disintegrating in terms of quality. What do you do with LSU?
That's a great question. I think, you know, you talk about the AP poll and, you know, there's varying opinions on that. I'm a strong supporter of the AP poll. I think it's fun. I think, you know, you look back at the preseason poll and we take shots at it all the time. People that do that cover this sport, love this sport. And I try to make one every Saturday night. I don't vote on the AP poll, but I kind of make my own, you know, and see, okay, here's what I think it's going to be. And LSU was the hard one over the weekend because all these SEC schools are hard to sort out right now. Very hard to sort out. So, you know, yesterday I went through all their schedules and trying to figure out, you know, here's what I think their record might be at the end of the year. Of course, that's going to get blown up. But here's my finding that you guys might think is interesting. I think the SEC will have 5 10-win teams.
Oh.
There's a very good chance of that. And there's some games that'll swing that. But if they have 5 10-win teams, they're probably going to have 5 playoff teams.
We hate to hear that.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that. But okay, so Bill, let me ask you about that. So in that scenario, if there's that many SEC representatives for the college football playoff, how do you see the Big 12 then shaking out from what you've seen so far through the first few weeks of their conference play? Because they seem to be a complete mess and that everyone's just going to kind of eat each other up, and they're going to end up maybe just having one representative in the conference champion.
You know, by mess, we mean fun.
Right. Yeah, it's really good and deep, right? But
right.
It's messy.
Mess, yeah. And I think you're right. It is a little messy because I think Texas Tech is very good. They're the one that kind of sticks out to me. They took it to Utah on the road. I like their defense up front. The problem here is like Iowa State, for example. Iowa State had a fantastic September. Has a veteran quarterback. And they're in my backyard this weekend in Cincinnati, and they're an underdog. So, like, that's hard to read when you see that. You know, I think they have 3 or 4 teams. They're probably shaped up to be a one-bid league because of that, because they're doing things. It's kind of like I was making this comparison yesterday. The SEC and the Big 12 are a little bit like the NFL. It's like we change our mind every week about who the best team is.
Yep.
And that's a good thing for publicity. In the Big 12 case, I don't know if it's a good thing for getting a bunch of playoff teams.
Bill, is it one of those scenarios, and I wonder if it's the same with the ACC as well, in the leagues that are in danger of being one-bid leagues. Would it actually be beneficial if, let's say, Texas Tech in the Big 12 and Miami in the ACC are the best teams, which I think is the case at this point? Would it be actually best for both of those conferences if, let's say, Texas Tech in the Big 12 and Miami in the ACC are the best teams, which I think is the case at this point? Would it be actually best for both of those conferences if if those teams went undefeated and then lost in their respective championship games so that you actually have a shot of getting 2 teams in?
Right. And like Miami, you were talking about them. Miami, I think, I'm almost ready to call them national championship good, like caliber. Now they got to go to Doak this weekend, and we'll find out. And it's too bad. In some ways, it's too bad Florida State lost because I kind of wanted to see a top 10 matchup there. On the other hand, it's pretty cool seeing that scene at Virginia. But yeah, if Miami were to go to the championship game, I know Georgia Tech's still undefeated. I think Louisville's a little underrated. That Louisville-Virginia game's like a hidden gem on the schedule this weekend.
Yeah.
So I think watch that one. So yeah, but to your point, yeah. And then if you're the Big 12, you want that to happen because a couple wrinkles in this playoff race that are coming are, one, Notre Dame's got to tack together. And if they reel off 10 straight wins, it would be hard to leave them out if, Miami wins the ACC. Be like, well, that's not a bad loss at all. And, the A&M loss is what it is. So, and then you get into the Big Ten, and I think the Big Ten is, I would say four teams, and it's pretty clear who those 4 teams are right now. But there are some teams lurking behind them that I think can get in the mix.
Bill, what do you do with quality wins versus accumulation of wins, right? Because I think that's the argument probably against Notre Dame. Their best opportunity for a win the rest of the year is going to be USC. We really don't know I at least don't really have a good feel on what I think USC is yet this year. But like you said, they very easily could be 10-2. I think that case could be made for some of the SEC teams. If you're right and you have 5 teams that go with 10 wins in the SEC as well, a couple of those probably aren't going to have crazy good quality of wins, and the 10 wins is kind of just the nature of how their schedule broke this year. Like, if you're the college football playoff committee, how do you weigh, hey, this team went 10-2 in a power conference versus they didn't beat anybody that we think very much of?
And that's the problem with Notre Dame. And I'm not against Notre Dame. I went to a Catholic school. I have plenty of Notre Dame friends. My best friend's a Notre Dame fan, all right? I've had this conversation 1,000 times about them joining the Big Ten and what it means and how cool it was growing up watching them play, Michigan and Michigan State and Purdue and Ohio State the last few years. So, you guys, out your way. Would it be awesome if Nebraska and Notre Dame traded home and homes? Come on, let's go.
I'm in.
But,
let's do it.
I'm for it.
Yeah, I'm in right now if they did that.
Sign me up.
I think the problem with them is, they don't have that collection in the SEC or the Big Ten. And one of the potential things down the line could be, let's say A&M goes 10-2, and some of their wins haven't been pretty, and Notre Dame goes 10-2, and they lost to A&M at the end of that game. You got to take A&M over them. And even if A&M's like the 5th best team in the SEC. And the Big Ten, to me, if you get 10 wins in the Big Ten, that's kind of the benchmark for me based on what happened last year. If you get to 10, you're going to be fine. And I think there are maybe 5 schools in the Big Ten that could possibly do that. And with the 3 or 4 at the top, Ohio State's a lock to do that, and Oregon's a lock to do that. It's those other ones that we'll see.
Bill, I want to push back a little bit on your kind of Big Ten comment there. So looking at Indiana's remaining schedule, if they were to go unbeaten against Michigan State, UCLA, Maryland, Wisconsin, and Purdue, that leaves obviously their big top 10 matchups against Indiana or against Oregon and against Penn State. Is it too far to say that Indiana, just based off of their national conversation, kind of what goes around their program and their 2 losses kind of to end their season last year, if they don't split those games, win one against Oregon or win one against Penn State and lose the other, that they are out of the college football playoff?
Yeah, that's a good pushback because I think you're right. And I don't admit being wrong often, but let's say if they've got it, let's for the exercise, if they need 2 of the last 3. And I love doing stuff like this, by the way. So you got to take 2 of these 3, and it's A&M, Notre Dame, and Indiana. And Indiana loses those 2 games you talk about. I'd be pretty close. Now, I'll that up a little bit with the uniform argument. If Michigan goes 10-2, and their only losses are Oklahoma and Ohio State, and they're in that conversation, with going out to Oklahoma and losing in a game that, it's a step-out game to me, that I think they would take Michigan in that case, because the Wolverines would be 8-1 in Big Ten play and only have those 2 losses. And I don't think anybody's getting penalized for losing to Ohio State right now.
Bill, I do wonder, you mentioned the Oklahoma game with Michigan, which I do think is fascinating, right? Do you think at some point we'll see that the College Football Playoff Committee is kind of going out of their way not to penalize teams for going and taking those games? Because I do think it's, I think it's better for college football that those games exist. Like, do you think at some point they'll just say, hey, like, if you went on the road against a good team and you lost a close game, we're not really going to kill you for that?
Yeah, I hope so. And then that means they have to take 9-3 teams that are at-large teams.
Yeah.
Because you got to give like last year we had this big, long argument. I think the difference was Indiana was 11-1.
Right.
And Alabama had lost that game at Oklahoma in conference play. But I'm all about it. I was at the Ohio State-Texas game. And Texas shouldn't be penalized for that. It was a 1-score game, and their defense is very good, and now they got to go through the SEC grind. And I know college football, and I'm one of those guys. I think I'm sensing that you guys kind of agree with me, maybe, that I think the sport has become a little SEC Big Ten centric because of the super conferences. And those are 2 different conferences in the challenges, though. I think the SEC has more teams that are capable of making the playoffs, but that doesn't have this added wrinkle of travel that is very real. I mean, Lincoln Riley had a point last week when he talked about going from an 11 a.m. kick to a really early kick in Illinois. But, I think we should all say, they signed up for that. It's not like when you signed the Big Ten contract, you didn't check a map and say, Rutgers is way over there. Yeah, we're going to have to go there sometime.
Bill, that is a good point. Rutgers is way over there, even for us here in Nebraska. Bill, I do want to ask you about Nebraska real quick. I know we just have you for a couple more minutes here before you got to get going, but I do want to ask you about Nebraska real quick. If they navigate this next 4-game stretch where they go at Michigan State, at Maryland, Michigan State at home, at Maryland, at Minnesota, and then Northwestern at home, and are 7-1 going into USC on November 1st. In your mind, will that mean to you they've taken that next step under Matt Rule, where maybe they're not ready to be in that playoff conversation yet, maybe they're not ready to be relevant on that scale, but they've gotten past the hump of where they've been for the last 10 years?
I talked to Matt Rule a couple of weeks ago, and I love his style. He's great to talk to, great interview for us, no question. And one of the things he was hinting at was that Michigan game wasn't the end-all, be-all of the season. It was a moment, and, you want more moments at Nebraska. That was a great game, by the way. I think Dylan Raiola is starting to prove that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country. A lot of hyped quarterbacks have not lived up to that this year. I think he's playing very well. The thing in that Michigan game was Michigan had it on the defensive front, and they still have it on that defensive front. But to answer your question, yeah, that would show consistency. That would show that they're not losing those games that get in the way. So if they were able to get to that USC game and do that, I mean, they could still be theoretically a playoff contender. Like I said, the Big Ten, that second tier with Michigan and Indiana and Nebraska and USC and Illinois, it's going to be interesting to see who sorts out. I still think Penn State, we didn't really talk about Penn State, Oregon. The tough loss for Penn State, I was there. I still think they have an excellent defense. It's just at some point, and you guys are going through it on a different level, but at some point you got to break through and beat those top 10 teams when you have the cards that you have.
That is Bill Bender from the Sporting News. Bill, appreciate your time. As always, great stuff. We'll talk to you again soon.
Anytime, guys. Thanks for having me on. Have a great week.
Thanks, Bill.
That is Bill Bender from the Sporting News.